Let's have a little history lesson here.
Hello, everybody. Yeah, great to see you all. And thank you so much for being here. And really, it's an honor to have the opportunity to play this role. I want to add that there's a mystery man on the stage who was not previously mentioned, former Congressman from the great state of Florida, David Jolly. All right. Just to start us off here, we're going to try to drill down on some of the issues that we're facing as a movement and talk with these three very, very distinguished leaders about the challenges, the vision, the pathway that we're on. And I just want to say, though, to start us off, that when I refer to them as distinguished leaders, I mean something very particular by that. And I don't mean that it is simply because of their titles and their position here. We're talking about a former member of Congress. We're talking about a former governor. We're talking about a former almost president of the United States. We're talking about people who had position and power, who had worked hard to build their careers inside of the political parties and could have stayed there, but they decided not to. They walked away from that in order to try to build something that is new, not just a new party, but a new kind of party, something that could break through the divide in our country and put us on a new path. So I want to ask all of you as we start this conversation to join me in showing them some love and respect for having the courage to stand up and get on the road that they are on. Thank you so much for what you are doing.
Oh, thank you. I was going to say, don't applaud us. Y'all are going to be doing the work.
So, okay. I'm going to start us off here. I want to ask each of you if you would talk some about what you were seeing, what your experience was, what you were feeling in the political settings that you were each in, and they were all different, right? What was that experience like? What were you seeing there, and what were you seeing in the country that made you want to get on this road? This is a hard road to be on. So what was that? David, let me start with you.
Thank you, Jackie, and thank you everyone for being here. Neither the governor nor I will bring the energy that Andrew does, so if we get a lull, we'll hand it off to him to get the crowd revved up again. Let's just fast forward. Let's set aside for a moment my journey through the Republican politics post-Trump, because there are unique challenges, I believe, within today's Republican Party related to his emergence. Set aside that evolution of this latest chapter, and I would say this. The parties have arrived at a place, both major and minor parties largely, in which they crush independent thought. They crush independent thought. And I thought we should exercise our politics in a way towards finding solutions and towards giving a voice to the most number of people and to celebrate the pluralism that the nation was founded on. That is not where parties are today. They're just not constructed that way. And you don't have to go all the way back to 1789 for examples of this. You can go back in our lifetime in the last 20 years on very hard issues. Take the question of abortion and life and the politics of reproductive health. Just 20 years ago, the Democrats were a big enough tent to have pro-life and pro-choice voices, and the Republican Party was as well. But look where we've come, not just on that singular issue, but on all issues. And where that revelation really occurred to me, my journey away from the party started. I was never a good enough Republican, to be honest, from the time I signed up. I was kind of a Bush 41 conservative Republican. Maybe a Governor Whitman type Republican, right? And And so I was out of step, right? Even when I served in Congress as a Republican, I supported marriage equality and climate science and campaign finance reform, gun reform, nothing that Republicans wanted to do. When I left the party, the natural question is, oh, are you going to become a Democrat? No, because the problem is I also support less taxes and less regulation. And so I could either stay in the Republican Party and exercise only a certain number of my political convictions and not the others, or I could join the Democratic Party and only exercise those other convictions, but not actually exercise my more traditional conservative positions. And it really led to this revelation that we don't actually have a political coalition today that celebrates diversity of thought, celebrates independent thought, encourages it, and says, you know, wherever your politics are, as a crowd, left, right, or middle, or personally, if you have diverse ideological positions, where is the coalition that would allow that? Now, to your point about how challenging this is, I think a lot of people just say it's too hard. It's too hard. Whether you're in elected office or you're in the crowd today, you just decide these challenges are too big. But I would suggest the day we stop fighting to move the independent movement forward, we lose.
Well, I've been a Republican all my life. My parents were introduced to one another at the 1932 Republican National Convention. So it's kind of been in the blood. But when I got to about 13, I did what most teenagers do. I started questioning my parents, deeply questioning my parents about their beliefs. But I came down on the side of respect for the individual as evidenced by letting them keep more money in their pocket or lower taxes, less government interference in our everyday lives, and some of the basic principles that we had. But like the former congressman, I wasn't a rock rib, this is how you have to believe. And the party wasn't like that when I was growing up. It really wasn't. We had members on both sides of the aisle who would get together and they'd fight like heck on the floor of the House or the Senate, and then they'd go out and have a drink and say, okay, how do we solve this problem? And we don't have that anymore. So the title of the book would have to change. It can't be It's My Party Too, because it isn't. I've found that. But, you know, when people would ask me, well, what are you? Liberal, conservative? I said, tell me the issue. I'll tell you where I stand, and then you decide. Because I'm not going to be in the same place on every issue. But I've watched as our parties, both sides, have gone away from that, not allowing you to think for yourself and starting to say, this is how you have to believe in order to qualify as one of us. And I don't know about all of you out there, but I'm just not like that, thank you. You're not going to tell me I have to believe this. You're going to let me think for myself. You're going to let me come to my own conclusions. And then, you know what? You and I are going to sit down and talk. And guess what we're going to find? We're really not that far apart. When you sit down and talk to somebody else on the other side, you find, yeah, we can peel back this onion and find places where we can agree and move things forward. I'd send a bill to the legislature when I was governor. And they'd do what legislatures are supposed to do. They changed it a bit. And then they'd send it back to me, and we'd get it together, and I'd sign it. And then the press would come and say, well, aren't you upset? I said, about what? Well, you didn't get it exactly the way you wanted it. I said, yeah, but we're making progress. We now have a movement in juvenile justice reform, let's say, we never had before. We have some things are happening. It's not exactly the way I proposed it, but that's okay, as long as we're moving forward. And that's what this party is about, is forward. So I'm really excited to be here because I think this is wonderful and this turnout is wonderful, and I love it. There are people who started about the age I started, right here in the front row. And it's good to have people understand we're the ones that are supposed to control this process. We're the ones to whom our elected officials answer, and we've got to make them answer and tell them how we want things done. And we're going to do it with the Forward Party. And I have 7 grandkids, and that's why I'm doing this happily. And I have no problem with walking away from the Republican Party. Well, it isn't a party, it's a cult right now. It isn't a party. And so I'm doing it, no regrets, and I'm looking forward to seeing Texas be the one, since I hate to say this, being from New Jersey, and we'll be next, we'll be right there. But you all are going to start us on our way, because you're the first, and make it the biggest and make it the best. The way you guys like to talk about things here in Texas. Live up to it. Go out there and get everybody else.
You know, the story of how your parents met, Governor, made me look around the crowd and be like, anyone meeting here today? Are they going to have like some story? Like X years ago, I met at the Forward Party launch. I want to reflect on how unusual it is for three organizations to come together and make common cause. David was the head of the SAM party. Governor Whitman was the co-chair, I believe, of the Renew America movement, and I of the Forward Party. And we all sat around a table and said, hey, you know what? Like, let's actually team up and try and make the changes that the American people need. Now, it sounds fairly common sense. I'm going to suggest that's kind of what we want from more of our leaders and politicians. But it's really unusual for organizations to set aside their individual agendas or egos or slight ideological differences and say, no, I'd rather go it alone. So hopefully the historic nature of this gathering actually ends up setting the tone for what we think the Forward Party can be here in Texas and around the country. And I'll say, working with Christine and David, I love these people. In large part because they are doing what they think is right for the country for no other reason but a spirit of patriotism and service and fellowship. There is no other reason. And I hope that feels familiar to many of you because that's why you're here too. You want that sense of fellowship with your fellow Texans and Americans, regardless of the letter next to their name. It's very, very destructive for us to be cordoned off in these tribes that have become increasingly polarized and ideological and made to feel like that person, that your neighbor, is now your antagonist. That's not a healthy society. It's not a healthy approach. And anyone who heads down this road, Jackie led off with this, and Jackie deserves a round of applause because she's been at this since the John Anderson campaign in 1980, I want to say. Yeah, thereabouts. But the people who head down this road are doing it simply because they know it's what the country needs. It's not an easy road. We're all in it for the long haul. But I will say that the potential energy around this movement is sky high. Where, as you can imagine, I walk the streets of New York City where I live, but I also walk around, a lot of places because I travel a lot. And I can't tell you how many people just look at me and just give me a thumbs up, be like, hey, yeah, Yang, forward, let's do it. Like there's so many people. Now, these are not people that are super political for the most part, but they can sense that that's why I'm in it, that's why the governor's in it, that's why David's in it. And I hope that's why you discover that you're in it too, because so many people want what we're going to deliver for the country.
All right, I wanted to ask you guys a question, which is about the part that isn't the thumbs up. You just talked about what happens when you're out in the street and people give you thumbs up and all of that. And there's so much positive energy here and everywhere you go around the country, people are really looking for something different. I was thinking about after the announcement came out of the merger, right, and the Forward Party, going forward and bringing these different organizations together. I'm sure many of you noticed that within like 24 hours of the announcement, there was a pile-on about, this can never work, this can fail, they're crazy, this
You
is
mean
gonna
the
screw
media that
things
makes
up.
their money from pitting us against each other did not actually embrace like a new positive unifying movement?
Oh yeah.
It's almost like their financial interests were in the other direction.
Yes, it was quite a roster from the New York Times to the Washington Post. And, as Andrew said, I've been in this business for a long time. I've seen a lot of these kinds of attacks come down. But even I was surprised by the rapid. They had obviously written these things before the announcement came out. They were so ready to go. But I wanted to ask you each to talk a little about your reaction to the reaction. What does it tell us about this project?
Let me take this head on. This is a great question and a great conversation. Realize what happened with this announcement. All the critics came out. These are critics who don't punch down, right? They don't waste their time punching down with people that can't compete with them. They punch sideways. The threat was real. And frankly, the criticism validated the independent movement. It absolutely did. And then I want to point out something else. Watch how the criticisms come out. How does it happen? Jim Acosta asked James Carville, what do you think about this? And he says, it's a stupid idea, one of the stupidest ideas I've ever heard. Jim Acosta was asking one of the leading Democratic strategists over the past 3 decades how he felt about competition. What do you think he was going to say? Okay? You can go critic by critic by critic by critic. Where is their orientation? Their orientation is in a legacy party, or their orientation is in a dogmatic ideological movement. Ask someone that is actually part of the majority of the country, the 40% of America that has declared their independence from any party. Ask those people, what do you think about an effort to coalesce people around a celebration of diversity and of solving problems? What do you think about that? And if you get somebody from that crowd, you don't get the answer you get from James Carville, and you don't get the op-eds that you see in the New York Times. What you get is a thank God somebody's finally doing this. Look, you can tell I get excited about this because the criticisms are garbage. And eventually what happens is they will realize this is not a movement where you just get to criticize Andrew Yang or Governor Whitman or David Jolly, because that's not what this movement's about. When they go overboard on their criticisms, they're criticizing you. And they're saying you're not allowed to exercise your politics. You're not allowed to exercise your franchise. How offensive is that? That we have leaders in media and politics that suggest you're wrong. 40% of the country, the majority of the country, is wrong. And our minority, the 23% today that identify as Republicans, or the 30% that identify as Democrats, somehow they have all the answers and they get to criticize you. It's garbage. It's a garbage moment. It's garbage politics. And I think that's all I got to say today.
Hey, you were ready for that one. I welcomed it because it said, just as David said, it said they were scared. And those in the media that make their living out of pitting us against one another so they can get headlines as to how terrible everything is, they were scared too. And so that's a good sign. It means we were right where we needed to be. I used to get asked all the time, my measure of whether I was doing something right or wrong was if I were getting attacked from both sides, I was right where I needed to be. I knew that, because you're never going to make everybody happy. Not everybody's going to agree with every issue in exactly the same place, and that's what we're about. People should be able to have their own opinions, their own thoughts, and still work together, and that's what we're doing. So when I saw how vitriolic that all was, I thought, wow, we really are in the right place. We're doing it right. And as for James Carville, he ran the campaign against me when I ran for governor the first time, and we beat him. So, I know about that.
What I got from the criticism was a deep-seated sense of insecurity among the current legacy parties that if people had a meaningful choice, that they would still stick with the current option. You know what I mean? Like there was like this real sense of like, oh no, like we can't let people think they actually have like a legitimate alternative, because if they did, they would stop voting for us. And when you get these criticisms, you know what the most prevalent one is spoiler. And then you're going to mess it up. You're going to mess up our perfect system that's functioning so well that that everyone. And then the correct response to the entire spoiler question is like, hey, just adopt a more modern voting system like ranked choice voting or approval voting, and problem solved. And you know what? No one ever says, oh, thank you for suggesting that. Like, let me look into that. that really would solve my problem, my concern. Because they're not at all concerned about people being able to vote how they choose or not messing up the purposes. They just don't want competition. Like no one ever is like, oh yeah, more modern voting method really would solve this problem. Hey, so you can tell how disingenuous the criticism is because it really is put out by people who are getting paid by the status quo. And one of the darkest elements of where we are today is that at this point, the market is dominating so many aspects of American life, but it's dominating these aspects because there are so many people who make their living in politics and media that are scared to go against their employer because it's going to cut off their economic opportunities. I mean, I think it was something Upton Sinclair said, like, it's very difficult to convince a man of something if his living depends upon the opposite. And that's what's happened with a lot of the folks. A lot of people, by the way, I'm friends with, and I like and respect. The other thing you have to know is that they'll say one thing in a public setting, and then they'll say something completely different individually. That happens all the time. And so if you're privy to that, then you realize just how superficial the media-driven narratives are because people are running scared. They can sense that the natural popularity of the status quo and the current legacy parties is slipping away by the day, and that if people had a genuine choice, they would seize on it.
Okay, I'm looking at the time clock in the back, which is a little bit hard to see, but I think we've hit 0, which I think means that we are out of time here. I'm just going to give us one more round here. This is a room full of people who are building the Forward Party in Texas. Give us a line or two about what you want them to be inspired by and to take out to people all across the state.
I would ask that everyone understands something, why this is historic. A lot of people conflate new party movements and independent movements with centrism. And you've seen a lot of parties try and fail to build something around an ideological center, if you will. Forward, as it has now been created, is a different kind of party. It's actually one that embraces left, right, and middle. It's a different kind of party. Now, it may actually produce consensus around centrism, but it's not formed around ideological dogma. I would say that's the most important thing. And then secondly, if you hear critics, or if you say, oh, but just do your politics inside the Republican or Democratic Party, I would suggest you tuck away this response, which is, everyone in this room are voters available to the major parties today. Don't let them blame you for exercising independent politics. Ask them why they have failed to attract the people in this room. Think about that. And this is where it really gets, we can go back to the Carville statement. James Carville's had 30 years to attract everybody in this room to join the Democratic Party, and he failed. Think about that. The parties today, and maybe the greatest contribution of this movement today, is it actually creates a coalition and causes one of the major parties to realize there's a whole world of voters out there that we failed to speak to. Because ultimately what would happen with a successful, viable, durable third party, new party movement, is we would look like other Western democracies around the world and start engaging in coalition governing. So don't let people blame you for your independent politics. Flip the script and ask them, why are the parties not interested in the voters in this room? Because that's the more pressing.
That is beautiful. Before I throw it to Governor Whitman, I obviously need to get new glasses because it turns out we have 15 minutes left for this section. It looked like a lot of zeros. So I apologize for that. And you can give a very long and full-throated answer to this question.
I was all primed to be nice and short and precise. Well, I would say this is the moment. This is truly, you hear it all the time. You're living through history. Of course we are. That's what history is all about. But this is the pivotal moment where we really can take control of the future. And it is up to us to do it. And it's up to us to understand that we can do it. We're in this for the long haul. This isn't going to be easy. It isn't going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen in this election cycle and probably not the next one, but we'll grow. Every election cycle will grow. And we won't, as we've said before, we're not a typical party in the sense that we'll support a Republican or a Democrat or an independent if they believe in the things that Andrew outlined, our beliefs. And if they'll work for things like open primaries and ranked choice voting so that everybody's vote matters no matter what kind of a district you find yourself in. And let me tell you something that really terrifies me. Right now, 50% of Americans live in states where election deniers are running for governor or secretary of state or attorney general, the people who oversee our elections. And there's some states where they're running for all three offices. These are people who do not believe the 2020 election was free, fair, secure, and accurate. Give it up. It's over. We know that election is done, thank you very much. Like him or not, Joe Biden is the president. That's it. That's the fact. If you put people in charge who don't believe in our electoral system to oversee our electoral system, they're going to set it up, because they're already moving this way, and I know this from some of the laws they've already worked to pass, to ensure that nobody gets elected who isn't part of their party. And that means disregarding the vote of thousands of others. This is too important a moment to let that happen, and by standing up and being part of the Forward Party, which says we demand to be heard, we demand our rights, we demand an understanding, we can think for ourselves, and by gum, we're going to do it. And back on the farm, I'd say it differently, but I'm not there now. We need every one of you to take that back to your communities. You believe in this. You believe in your voice should be heard, and this is the time to do it, and Forward is a way to do it. We need you to take that message back so we can really grow far and fast and make those critics eat their word.
I feel great about Forward here in Texas, in part because I think it's a natural home for us. There's so many people I've met who are already activated, that are pragmatic, problem solvers, just want to get things done. They're tired of the blame, they're tired of the hate, they're tired of the division. And if we can get that group together, we're going to end up transforming politics here in Texas and around the country, either by creating pressure, as David said, on one of the existing parties that's in charge, or by getting seats at the table and changing policy ourselves. And as the math guy, I have to say, one of the things that is on the table here in Texas, let's say you win 10 state rep races. You think, oh, like 10's not that many. In a polarized state, 10 can actually be the fulcrum and control policy, where either party needs to go to those 10 and be like, hey, I want to get something done. And so you can end up balancing the government very, very quickly without getting 51% of seats or winning 51% of races. The same thing is even possible in something like the US Senate, where let's imagine that there was an independent running for US Senate, which there is. Let's say that he's 1 point up on the incumbent right now, which he is. Let's say that he gets in there. Then people be like, oh, Forward Party, how are you going to do this? How many US senators does it take to influence policy in a polarized country? One. You know, so you look at us and be like, oh, it can't be done, like, you know, two-party system. It's like, look, one senator. By the way, that senator's name is Evan McMullin. You can look him up. It's a real race. I mean, Evan McMullin, CIA operative for 11 years, true patriot, came back, ran for president as an independent, and is now running for U.S. Senate as an independent. And in Utah, the Democrats did something highly unusual. They had decided not to run a candidate. Because Utah is a state that Republicans won by 21 points. So you have, on one hand, the Trump-endorsed incumbent, Mike Lee, and then Evan McMullin, then that's it. And so we have opportunities here in Texas and around the country to meaningfully impact and transform American politics, not in some distant future, though we're in it for the long haul, But we can take advantage of opportunities right freaking now, Texas. And I think you have some races in 23. Am I right? Like, we can start winning local races here in Texas over the next 12 months and be in position to improve the lives of the people here in Texas, either through influencing current parties or setting policy ourselves, 18, 24 months. Let's make it happen.
All right. Since we do have the time, I'm going to come back around. Folks who registered for the event today were offered the opportunity to submit questions to put to the three of you. And one of the questions that came up fairly frequently was the question about what does it mean to build a party that's based on values rather than on, strictly speaking, a platform. This is where we are on the issues. And people, wanted to talk about this or hear you all talk about this, for example, relative to the Supreme Court decision on Roe v. Wade and issues of immigration and so on and so forth. And I know that the three of you and everyone in the room holds to positions that you believe in as individuals, but here, as I understand it, we're trying to make a distinction between an individual's position on a particular issue and a values perspective or a set of values propositions that a new kind of party can be built on. So could you each speak to some of that, how you think about that and what that means to the American public?
Yeah, this is a very critical question, and it's what I referenced earlier. This is a different kind of party, and fundamentally what it does is it empowers candidates closest to their communities to articulate the majority position of their community. Imagine that. Right now, if you were to sign up with a party and say, I want to be a candidate, you basically get the platform from Washington and you run on that. Why is it at the start of each cycle that today's Democratic Party writes off half of the country as being antithetical to their values, and Republicans write off the other half as being antithetical to their values? Republicans don't try to win anything in California. Democrats don't try to win anything in Alabama. It seems kind of silly. What if you built a party big enough, broad enough to represent the entire country? To actually have forward party elected offices in Alabama and in California. Think about that, right? So functionally then, how do you create a national party over that? What you do is you say, we're going to empower candidates that successfully represent the majority voices in their community. And we're going to thread together these candidates around basic fundamental shared values. So we talked, for instance, at the Serve America movement, we talked about accountability, transparency, problem solving, basic electoral competition. As the left, right, and middle kind of came together among these three organizations to form the new Forward Party, there was this need to articulate some fundamental premises, which Andrew articulated earlier. I talk about defense of democracy, personal liberty, and economic opportunity. I think you'll see in the literature it's thriving communities, free people, and defense of democracy. So that's kind of it at the national level. And we believed that if we can recruit candidates with those values that then give voice to the majority opinion of their community, we will have done something radically different from any of today's parties.
The Forward Party is going to be a party based on principles rather than specific ideological issues. It is getting back to what I was brought up on to believe a party was. And I know Andrew and some of the others that have been working on Forward for a while have heard this before, but my father, who, by the way, was a Republican state chairman for 10 years, after my mother was Republican National Committee woman for 10 years. But I think they're supporting, I know they'd be supporting what I'm doing now, that parties were like umbrellas. You had the handle, which represented the center core set of principles, shared principles. And then you had the ribs, and they were different ways of interpreting those principles and different issues that people brought to the party, but they were all under the same canvas because you shared those basic principles together. That meant you could have a liberal, conservative, and moderate Republican, or a liberal, conservative, moderate Democrat, because they shared different, they believed and took up different issues, but they shared those core principles. And that's what the Forward Party is going to be. When we have our convention next summer and adopt a platform, I think we'll see it just the way David put it out there and the way Andrew has articulated. It's going to be broad. It's respect for the individual freedom, economic, the ability for everybody to grow economically, to defend our democracy, to believe in the Constitution and the rule of law. We can all agree on those things, and then we'll get down into those issues. But it will be community by community, because different communities have different issues that they worry about and they care about. It's not what Washington tells you to worry about. It's what you need to worry about every day in your own home. That's what we should be about, and that's what we will be about.
The entire policy stance argument is being used to separate us into left versus right. And at this point, it's not left versus right. It's the front of the line versus the back of the line. And most of us are in the back of the line. It's like inside versus those on the outside looking in. You know, that's what is agitating so many Americans of every background, that they feel like we don't have control or even say in our own future. And when you look at the platform of a forward national party, there are some very, very big things that we already agree on and I think are immensely meaningful. Where if you change the process to nonpartisan open primaries and ranked choice voting, that transforms the incentives for both candidates and the people in office, and I think will attract better people to run for office. You know, the people influence the policy, and the process determines the people. So if you so if you go to Democrats and Republicans, hey, you for this, you're for that. At this point, it's like you're essentially bullshitting me at this point, because nothing you're suggesting is actually going to happen in this system the way it's currently comprised. You're just trying to gin me up on this thing. I mean, there was a Republican senator who said to me, an issue is worth more to us unaddressed than addressed. And think about that. Like, why is that? Because if it's unaddressed, I can get you angry, I can raise money, I can get votes. If I reach forward and address it, what happened? I get punished, because when I go back in front of my base, they get mad at me for compromising. So then you say, hey, I'm for this, I'm for that. It's like you're actually just using that as a cudgel to separate people into these disparate tribes and stay in office and just keep us upset and angry. Like that's what we have to get away from. So you're for these process changes. That's fundamental. And I challenge anyone who comes to you and says, hey, like, what are you doing against the Democrats? What are you doing against the Republicans? Be like, well, if the Republican Party here in Texas or the Democratic Party here in Texas got behind nonpartisan open primaries and ranked choice voting, I'd really think about it. And when you challenge them with that, you will see they cannot do it, because they cannot be for a process that relinquishes control and gives you the say. Like, the process is the point. So the second thing is values, where if you lead with grace and tolerance, which is what the Forward Party is about, say, look, you can disagree with me and we're still Americans, we're still human beings, we still respect and admire and can be friends and love each other. Like, that also is a game changer, and it's what tens of millions of Americans want for ourselves and our own lives. On the third front, we're going to be able to access, you know, all of the latest policies and facts and innovations that are available, so that communities can decide for themselves, equipped with the kind of tools to be able to come around the table and hammer out what's going to work best for them. So I think there's a lot we can do as a national party that still leaves the main decisions in the hands of you, the people who should be making decisions about your own lives.
I just wanted to give one example as to how bad it is now, and it's been getting this way for a while. There was a point of time after I'd been reelected as governor where they put a lot of pressure on me to run for the U.S. Senate. And in order to do that, I'd never taken PAC money or anything like that. So I had to, but it takes a lot of money in New Jersey. So I went down to Washington to the Republican Senatorial Campaign Committee. And Mitch McConnell was, I think, the vice chair or something, and I met with him. And he looked at me and he said, if you say one word about campaign finance reform, you won't get a penny from us. One word about an issue that I think is critical. And I said, okay, that's fine, I'm out of here. I'm not running for Senate. If that's the way you do things, I'm out of here. That's what they do.
All right, well, I think we're going to make them eat some of those words, right? Anyway, join me in thanking these three incredible leaders for sharing their vision and.
Hey,
Let's go,
hey,
Texas!
Jackie, can I say something to Andrew? I think,
Yeah.
I'm sure this is on behalf of Andrew and the governor and all the people that helped lead the Serve America movement, the Renew America movement, and forward. I want to say thank you to everybody in this room. And it is not performative, it is sincere. Look, this is the culmination of a lot of effort, but it's an effort that represents a majority of the country, and the work is done in communities like yours. And for you to spend time investing in forward, I can't tell you, I've never been more excited about democracy than standing in this room seeing everybody. Thank you all.
Thank you.